event, to the Fremd English department, and to all of you fine young students for participating and engaging this week. It makes it really great. So without further ado, I'll introduce our next presenter. Our featured reader is a New York City performance poet, one of the most well-known poets to have emerged from the Poetry Slam movement, and one of the original poets to appear in the HBO series Deaf Poetry Jam. He's a four-time National Poetry Slam champ and the author of 4 books, including What Teachers Make, In Praise of the Greatest Job in the World. Also, we have his newest book, Bouquet of Red Flags, for 15 bucks up here if you're interested in purchasing, and some really cool pens for 5 bucks. So come on stage when he's finished and check out what he's got. Since 1998, over 1,000 people have become teachers after reading or listening to Taylor Mali's passionate poems about his experiences teaching middle school, high school, and college. To mark the achievement, he donated, interesting fact, 12 inches of his hair to the American Cancer Society. So please help me welcome the former voice of all Burger King commercials and a true advocate for teachers, Taylor Mali.
That is in fact true. For 10 months while I was teaching, I would go into the voiceover booth and would say some variation of this line. When you have it your way, it just tastes better. Burger King, offer available for a limited time only, present participation required. The first time I went in, don't clap for that. I taught. No, what did I just say? What did I just say? Don't make me repeat myself. I've never stopped teaching, but I taught at a regular school for 10 years. But I made more money saying those 10 words than I did teaching for 10 years. This is called Where I Think of You. And I just opened this up, and I don't think I've ever read this poem out loud, so this is a first. Where I Think of You. The American School of London, where once I taught a rainbow of 8th graders poetry for a week straight, 2 times a day, and was so filled with jet-lagged happiness, even though I knew that you and I would never last, sits in a part of London called St. John's Wood, 2 short blocks from Abbey Road, the street made famous when the Beatles crossed it. This is where I think of you. You, whose only reason for never getting a passport before was, why should I get a passport if I'll never get to go anywhere? A logic I half regret calling white trash wisdom at its best. That was supposed to be funny, so I'm going to read it again. This is where I think of you, you whose only reason for never getting a passport before was, why should I get a passport if I'll never get to go anywhere? A logic I half regret calling white trash wisdom at its best. But which made me, shut up, but which made me suspect you lacked not just imagination, but a decent dreaming streak. You received your passport in the mail on the same day you received your first credit card, and you told me that it was proof that you loved me, that you weren't gone, and so you came to visit me in London. And more than any single tear or desperate caress, clutching need or prayer, what I miss now about you most, what I remember, is your face when first you saw Abbey Road, that sign, that street, that corner, and the white stripes of the crosswalk, how you stopped and stared and could not move like it was a shrine you did not know you sought, and you, a marble statue in the middle of an empty room, suddenly bursting into bloom. Sunday nights I lie in bed awake as all teachers do, and wait for sleep to come, as though sleep were the last student in my class to arrive. My grading is done, my lesson plans are in order, and still sleep wanders the hallways like middle school band practice. I'm a teacher, this is what I do. I'm a miracle worker. Like a builder builds and a sculptor sculpts, a preacher preaches and a teacher teaches. We are experts in the art of explanation. I know the difference between the questions to answer and the questions to ask. That's an excellent question. What do you think? If two boys are fighting, I break it up. But if two girls are fighting, I wait until that shit's over, and then I drag what's left to the nurse's office. I'm not your mother! I'm not your father! I'm not your jailer! I'm not your torturer! I'm not even your biggest fan in the whole wide world, even though sometimes I act like all of these things. I know you can do these things that I make you do. That's why I make you do them. I'm a teacher, and that's what we do. We're miracle workers. Once in a restaurant, when the waiter said, "Can I bring you anything else?" And I said, "No, thank you, just the check, please." And he said, "Oh, come on. How about a look at the dessert menu?" I knew I had become a teacher when I said, "What did I just say?" Please don't make me repeat myself. In the quiet hours of the dawn, I write my assignment sheets, and then I print them without spell checking them, because I'm a teacher, and teachers don't make spelling mistakes, do we? So as a matter of fact, the new school dress code will affect all members of the 5th, 6th, and 78th grades. And if you need an extension on your essays examining the pubic wars from a hysterical perspective, you may have only until January 331st. I hope that's not a problem for anybody. I like to lecture on love. I like to speak on responsibility. At the drop of a hat, I will talk about honor and integrity and the importance of telling the truth always. And when my students say, "Mr. Molly, are we going to be responsible for this?" I say, "If not you, then who? You think my generation is going to be responsible for this? We're the ones who got you into this mess. Now you are our only hope." And when they say, "What we meant, Mr. Molly, is are we going to be tested on this?" I say, every single day of your lives. Once, while a student of mine was digging in her backpack for a pen, I put on the corner of her desk a pen, but she didn't see me do it. So when I walked to the other side of the classroom and she raised her hand, still not seeing the pen that I had put on the corner of her desk, and said, "Mr. Molly, do you mind if I borrow a pen from you?" I went, She still didn't see it. You already possess everything you require to succeed, including a pen. Whoosh. For a second, she still did not see the pen that I had put on the corner of her desk, but said instead, "Mr. Molly, you are probably the weirdest teacher I have ever had. Could you please just loan me a pen?" Oh my God! You're a miracle worker. How did you do that? And I wanted to say all I did was give you what I knew you needed before you knew you needed it. So thank you for the compliment, but education is the miracle. I'm just the worker. I'm a teacher, and that's what we do. Thank you. This is the special pen that I have for sale, and it's based on this poem, which is called "On Girls Lending Pens." It describes, well, it's very obvious what it describes. As I write this poem, as I recite this poem for you, keep in mind two things. I wrote this when I was in 10th grade. 10th grade in the house? Yeah. So don't think that the poems or stuff that you're working on now is not stuff that you will use. When my first book came out, I didn't have enough poems to fill it, and the editor said, "How about go into some of your early stuff?" And I looked back into my journals, and I found that this poem that I'd written in 10th grade was good enough to be in it. And I only changed one line. Also, you should know that I went to an all-boys school, so I'm totally lying in this poem. I have no idea what it was like to ask a girl for a pen until I got to college. So, but I'd heard about it. I'd heard that this would be a great idea for a poem. So, this is called On Girls Lending Pens. It's also, they're going to be the first rhyming poem that I've written, that I've recited so far today. I love rhyming. We'll talk more about that later. Maybe you ask me a question about rhyme. On Girls Lending Pens. Still, the poem hasn't started. This is not part of the poem. I didn't mean to do this. This is just me talking. Notice I loved Dr. Seuss and Robert Frost, and you can tell in this poem the rhyme scheme is rhyming couplets. I walked into the classroom and I straight to my chair, but when I reached for my pen, it wasn't there. I had no pen or crayon or pencil. I was stuck before class without a writing utensil. I could have asked the teacher if I had dared, but I know she would have said, "You're unprepared." So to be diplomatic and avoid the fight, I quickly turned to the girl on my right. "Do you possibly have a pen I could borrow? I'll use it today, have it back by tomorrow." "Oh, for sure," she said. "I've got plenty." And she turned around with a handful of 20. "Oh, I really don't care what color or style. I'll take that fountain pen," I said with a smile. "Oh, you don't want that one. It comes out all ugly. Plus, it's made of pure gold." "Yeah," she said to me smugly. "Then how about the blue one?" "No, that one hops." "Okay, maybe the green one?" "Nah, it comes out in glops." "Black one? I'm afraid it's having trouble connecting." "Red one? I need it if we do any in-class correcting." "Look," I said, my voice filling with fear, "just give me a pen before the teacher gets here." But this one always comes out in tons. The yellow one skips and the purple one runs. When the brown one dries, it looks really icky, and the orange one's covered with something sticky. This one's for emergencies, in case I get confused, because it's clean and it's fresh and it's never been used. I keep this one for quizzes, because it brings good luck, and the ballpoint is splotchy, and the cap is stuck, and this one's empty with the silver band, and the felt tip will leak all over your hand, and this one's cracked, and that's gone berserk, and this one would be perfect for you, except it doesn't work. But here, take this one's fine. "Oh no, wait, sorry, that one's mine." I think she went on, but I couldn't have cared. I decided it was better to go unprepared. Thank you. Thank you. That is written by a 16-year-old Taylor Molly, capitalizing on gender stereotypes back in 10th grade, having never asked a girl for a pen. This is the Taylor Molly $5 on Girls Lending Pens pen, which has the entire text of that poem on a little pull-out screen like that. And in case you're the kind of person who wouldn't be interested in spending $5 on a pen, it does also on the backside say "shut up." So if you have a friend who says something asinine, you can just go. And if you're not the kind of person who would spend $5 on a poem, or a poem even that says "shut up" on the backside of it, oh good, we're going to get a picture of this. Taylor Molly started out Writers Week by telling the students to shut up. Shut up and listen to me. That's what Writers Week is all about. Also written in tiny letters that only the photographer, if he zoomed in, could see, are the 101 acceptable two-letter words in Scrabble. Uh-oh, they break easily. You'll notice, okay. Two-letter words in Scrabble with their definitions, all the way from which is a type of lava, to za, which is what the cool kids call pizza. And is your name Grant? What is your name? Russ, sorry. Russ is going to have a box of my pens, and they are $5. And that's all about that. In a moment, I'm going to do some questions, answer some questions, is what I meant by do some questions. But I'm going to read a new poem now about when I was a kid. I got two older twin sisters and a younger brother, so there are four of us. And we each had a word that we just could not stand to be said in our presence. And so this poem is about those four words. But I decided that wouldn't make enough sense to people, so I went online and looked for a list of the most hated words in English. Do you know what the number one is? Moist. The most disgusting word in the English language, according to most people, is moist. But raise your hand if you've got a word that you just, for reasons you don't have to go into, you just cannot stand to have this word said in your presence. What? Crinkle? Pringle, like the potato chip? Kringle. I'll try to work that in just for you. Kringle. Ew, I hate it too. Like, what's the football player? Hinkle McCringleberry? Anybody else? Another word you hate in the back row? Happiness? I hate the word happiness. Oh my God. Oh my God. All right. I hate happiness. I had a gig in Austin, Texas last week, and I had such a headache when I got to the car rental counter. This is not the poem, this is just me talking. I got such a headache, and there was a couple in front of me, and the woman who was giving them their car said, "So, what brings you to Austin?" And they, chatted insipidly for 90 seconds, and it was horrible. And I was thinking to myself, what do I say? I hope she doesn't ask me why I'm in Austin. So I step up to the counter, and she goes, "What brings you to Austin?" And I had to lie. I said, "A funeral." And it just shut her right up. It's perfect, it's great. All right, here's a poem called Pity the Package Left on Lover's Lane as a Courtesy, in which the author discusses the words that he and his siblings hated as children, written with some of the most commonly hated words in the English language. At the top of every list of hated words in English squats moist, like a bulbous yolk of phlegmy curds that has oozed through your panties and smeared the crotch of your slacks with happiness. Moist is, without question, the nuclear ointment of everybody's verbal Kringle shindig. But there are other words that are almost as bad, at least to certain people. Certain words that certain people cannot have uttered in their presence without cringing and disgustation, irregardless of the meaning of the word. For me, that word was always pity. I can barely say it to this day, which I first heard in a story about Paddington Bear that my mother read aloud. "'Tis a pity," she said, and I ran from the room, a scream, gurgling, and finally ejaculating from my jowls. I don't think that I'm not capable of the emotion simply because I hate the sound of the word. That's not what's going on here. For one sister, the word was courtesy, which we would wheedle into stories like curdled milk delivered with a curtsy. Or worse, courteous, the adjective. Why are adjectives more disgusting than their nounal forms? Like the word nounal. I offer as examples only beauteous, penicular, and diarrheal. Not because I cannot think of others, but because I just spit up a little bit in my mouth and the viscosity of my mucus has become moist and pungent, like a kringle. For my brother, Peter, the word was two words, a place, Lover's Lane. He couldn't stand to hear of it. So of course we said it to him all the time, my sisters and I, whenever we passed one. "Oh look, it's Lover's Lane." Or we offered up Lover's Lane as a place he might want to take a lovely lady for a little bit of necking or heavy petting. Lover's Lane? No? 'Tis a pity then, for 'tis beauteous. But my oldest sister, Adair, had no word she could not bear to hear, which just wasn't fair. So we decided that she was lying, and that the word she hated was package. We insisted she despised it, and had so all her life, but secretly, so as not to give us the verbal kryptonite that we sought. And we would scream at her, "Package!" And at first she would just smile and say she didn't hate the word package. We screamed at her again, even louder, and soon she became angry and protested, "Stop saying the word package! I don't hate it!" So after that, we continued until she cried. Which is really all we wanted in the first place, a chink in her armor, a way to get under her skin. All anyone who loves you wants is to know that they can hurt you. Thank you. I'm going to do one more poem and then answer any questions if there are any questions, so long as you can ask your question without saying the word like, unless you're doing it as a verb or a preposition. And I'd like to invite you, the photographer, to come up on stage right here. You're going to get great pictures from, come now. I'm going to ignore you, and after 30 seconds they will too, and you'll get, these are the better pictures. Okay. And also, when I know that there's a photographer, I tend to do things that I know are going to make dramatic pictures. And like, this is the picture. This is the picture that makes it into the yearbook, or this is the picture. This is the picture that makes it into the yearbook, and it has nothing to do with anything I did. Well, actually, it just reminded me of a poem that I'll do later. I'm having way too much fun up here. So I wrote this poem making fun of my own generation and the way we speak, hoping that if I did a good enough job with this poem, kids would stop using the word like forever. So if my poem had not been this good, your generation might have been inflicted with the same verbal tick that mine was. So don't feel like I'm picking on you, I'm picking on myself. And you, sort of. I'm writing the poem that'll change the world, and it's Lily Wilson at my office door. Lily Wilson, the recovering like addict, the worst I've ever seen. So like bad that the entire 8th grade started calling her like Lily, like Wilson, like, until I made my classroom a like-free zone, and she could not speak for days. But when she finally did, it was to say, "Mr. Molly, this is so hard. Now I have to think before I say anything." Well, imagine that, Lily. It's for your own good, even if you don't like it. I'm writing the poem that'll change the world, and it's Lily Wilson at my office door. Lily is writing a research paper for me about how homosexuals, shouldn't be allowed to adopt children. So I think I'm writing the poem that's going to change the world, and here comes like Lily, like Wilson at my office door. She's having trouble with her paper. She's having trouble finding sources for her paper, which is to say ones that back her up. They all seem to argue in favor of what I thought I was against. And it took 4 years of college and 3 years of graduate school and every incidental teaching experience that I have ever had to let out only, "Well, that's a very interesting problem, baby. What do you propose to do about it? That's what I want to know." And the 8th grade mind is a beautiful thing. Like a newborn baby's face, you can often see it change before your very eyes. I can't believe I'm saying this, Mr. Molly, but I think I'd like to switch sides. And I want to tell her to do more than just believe it, but to enjoy it. That changing your mind is one of the best ways of figuring out whether or not you still have one. Or even that minds are like parachutes, that it doesn't matter so much what you pack them with, so long as they open at the right time. Oh God, Lily, I want to say you make me feel like a teacher, and who could ask to feel more than that? I want to say all of this, but I manage only, Lily, I am so impressed with you. So I finally taught somebody something, namely how to change her mind. And I learned in the process that if I ever change the world, it's going to be one 8th grader at a time. Thank you. I see a lot of people with notebooks out. Are you taking notes are there teachers who make you take notes? Okay, like a math teacher says, fine, I'm not going to teach math. Go to the auditorium for Writers' Week, but you have to write me up a little report. So I should probably tell you that poem is called Like Lily, Like Wilson. It's good to write down titles. The one that I read about my siblings was called Pity the Package. Pity the package left on Lover's Lane as a courtesy. I read my opening poem was called Where I Think of You. And I think I did On Girls Lending Pens. And I think that's all I've read so far. Questions? If you can say your word, ask your question without saying like. The first question is always the hardest one to ask. It requires somebody with tremendous internal and external beauty. Yes?
When did you know that you wanted to be a teacher?
When did I know I wanted to be a teacher? After I knew I wanted to be a poet. My father wrote occasional poems for special occasions. Poetry was always, in watching him, I learned that poetry is kind of a public presentation. He never memorized his poems, and if I think he'd lived longer, I would have convinced him that the poem is vastly improved if you can memorize it. I went to graduate school in Kansas to become a better poet, and part of the terms of my scholarship was I had to teach a class that you'll all have to take when you get to college. It was called freshman composition. I don't think it's called that anymore, but every university and college has their own version of the freshman seminar. It's where they make you write a lot. It's the class they make you take to ensure that you did not graduate from high school without knowing how to write a decent essay, because that happens. People make it to college, especially a land-grant university like Kansas State University. If you're graduated from a Kansas high school, you are guaranteed a spot at Kansas State University, which is a great thing until it's not. Not everybody should go to college. And it was in the process of teaching my freshman writing classes. When we got together on the weekend, when my peers wanted to talk about the stories and poems they were writing, I wanted to talk about our students and how do you teach this lesson. So it was in graduate school, studying how to be a better poet made me realize I wanted to be a teacher. And it's funny because my poems about teaching have led me back to poetry. And the two arts, teaching and poetry, are very linked for me. The Latin poet Horace said over 2,000 years ago that the task of the poet was to either instruct or entertain, and that the greatest poets can do both at the same time. I say that is also the job of the greatest teachers, to instruct and entertain. Next question, yes? Can't hear you. Do you want me to perform what teachers make? Yeah. Dear Lord, okay. How about I perform what teachers make, adding little things about what really happened that night that a lawyer insulted me and the entire teaching profession. I'll do it later. All right, anything else? Yes?
Why are you not the Burger King guy anymore?
Because Burger King changes the voice on all their commercials once a year. So you don't get that gig forever. That's why. But the first time I went in, they said, okay, Taylor, slate your name and then say the tagline 3 times, getting sort of progressively sexier each time you say it. So the guy goes, ready, we're on, and Taylor Molly, when you have it your way, it just tastes better. When you have it your way, it just tastes better. When you have it your way, it just tastes better. Say it again. especially, but when I go to a high school, I tend to read too many funny poems. Because at an event like this, the last thing I want is for somebody who came to the audience saying, well, poetry, fine, I'll go so that we don't have to go to math, but I'm not going to like it because I don't like poetry. And the last thing I want to do is read. In a way, I'm not trusting my own work enough. I've got plenty of poems that are not funny. They're more serious, and I'll read some. But I tend to rely on humor. Because you know what? It's not easy to write a funny poem. I mean, it's easy to write a bad funny poem. But laughter is a sign of understanding. You don't laugh at things you don't understand. Anything else?
In your first poem, you talked about teaching in London. Did you
Right.
actually teach in London?
No, I made that up completely. Yes, of course I did.
Wonderful.
Did you grow up in London?
No, I
Oh. Yeah, I taught for 2 weeks at the American School of London, and it was maybe 2004. And I taught the 8th grade, and I got to see them twice a day for 2 weeks. It was wonderful. All right, I'll close it out with some other poems. Here's What Teachers Make. What Teachers Make is probably my most well-known poem, and I kind of have to recite it. I'm probably going to have to recite it at every reading until I die. Which could be, never mind, I'm not going to say that. But there's only one thing worse than having one poem that you have to read at every reading that everybody wants to hear, and that's having no poems anybody wants to hear. So if this is my the Rolling Stones couldn't play a concert without playing Satisfaction or Jumping Jack Flash. This is my Jumping Jack Flash. What teachers make, or objection overruled, or if things don't work out, you can always go to law school. He says the problem with teachers is, what's a kid going to learn from someone who decided that his best option in life was to become a teacher? I'm sorry. He reminds the other dinner guests that it's true what they say about teachers. Those who can, do, and those who can't, teach. I'm sorry. I decide to bite my tongue instead of his. And resist the urge to remind the other dinner guests that it's also true what they say about lawyers, because we're eating after all, and this is supposed to be polite conversation. I mean, you're a teacher, Taylor. Come on, be honest. What do you make? And I wish you hadn't done that. Asked me to be honest, because you see, I've got this policy about honesty and ass-kicking, which is if you ask for it, well, then I have to let you have it. You want to know what I make? I make kids work harder than they ever thought they could. I can make a C+ feel like a Congressional Medal of Honor, and I can make an A- feel like a slap in the face. How dare you waste my time with anything less than your very best. I make kids sit through 40 minutes of study hall in absolute. No, you may not work in groups. No, you cannot ask me a question. Why won't I let you go to the bathroom? Because you're bored, and you don't really have to go to the bathroom, do you? I make parents tremble in fear when I call home at around dinner time. Hi, this is Mr. Molly. Hope I haven't called at a bad time. I just wanted to talk to you about something that your son said today in class to the biggest bully in the grade. He said, hey, leave that kid alone. I still cry sometimes, don't you? And that was the noblest act of courage that I have ever seen. I make parents see their children for who they are and who they can be. You want to know what I make? I make kids wonder. I make them question. I make them criticize. I make them apologize and mean it. I make them write, and then I make them read. I make them spell. Definitely beautiful, define nightly, be-a-beautiful, until they will never misspell either one of those words again. I make them show all their work in math class, and then hide it on their final drafts in English. I make them realize that if you've got this, then you follow this. And if somebody ever tries to judge you based on what you make, you give them this. Here, let me break it down for you so you know what I say is true. Teachers make a goddamn difference. Now what about you? Totally not how it happened. Not how it happened. What I don't mention is that the lawyer who hosted the party, I make it sound like a dinner party, because it doesn't really matter that it was actually a New Year's Eve party that he was throwing at his parents' brownstone on the Upper West Side. He was the host of the party. There were 150 people there, mostly lawyers, all in tuxedos, and lawyers' girlfriends and boyfriends wearing ridiculously tiny mini black cocktail dresses. Not the boyfriends, but maybe one or two. And he was charming. This lawyer was 6'5". He's very good looking, and he was so charismatic that when he tried to make his point that anybody who would willingly become a teacher must be so stupid they actually shouldn't be allowed to do it. Like, what kind of idiot looks at what the teaching profession is in America and says, yeah, that's for me, that's totally for me, I'm gonna do that. And he could not understand being a first